What's up, guys? It's your girl Nevaeh.
This your boy Famous J.
We're back at it again with another video, and this time we're reacting to what happens when death row execution fails. So
We gonna go ahead and tune into this. Make sure y'all like, comment, and
subscribe.
you know what I'm saying. Thank y'all for the 135 subscribers, and thank y'all for the TikTok followers that came on this platform and subscribe to us. No count. Let's go ahead and get to the video.
Skin splitting open, veins blackening, flames erupting from the eyes. What happens when an execution fails or goes horribly wrong? We'll start with a very recent case, one which involves some failure, but the authorities managed to succeed in the end. We're including it just to give you an idea of what can go wrong. The condemned man was Angel Nieves Diaz. He'd been convicted of a murder, which he always said he was innocent. His last words were, "The state of Florida is committing a crime because I'm innocent." The death penalty is not only a form of vengeance, but also a cowardly act by humans. Prior to that, he had some turkey and cheese tacos for his final meal. At Florida State Prison, he was strapped to the gurney. The authorities injected the drugs and waited some more. Then they watched as Diaz's arm went black from chemical burns. Then after 10 minutes, obviously in pain, he muttered, "What's going on?" Now, you think the state would have stopped the execution then and there, but no. In this case, they just kept going. After 24 minutes, when Diaz should have been long dead, his head jolted. His eyes then opened wide, giving a fright to all the people watching. Diaz was cheating death. Again, if you are that way inclined, you might think some higher power wanted to save him. He choked, and then people said his skin ripped. It was a terrible thing to behold. An expert later talked about his injury, saying, "That's the kind of injury we see when a kid has fallen in a campfire or set his arm on fire." My guess is someone who got this when alive would need skin grafts to heal.
What I gotta say is that they're bogus for trying to continue his death. When they saw his arm was blackening and it was struggling, and they just continued to put him to death row.
Maybe they're like
they didn't care, I guess, because he's already getting put on death row. But the point is so they can go out peacefully. He was over here struggling.
That person described the injuries as skin slippage, which is a term you probably never want to hear again in your life. He also said he'd never seen anything like it. Then after 34 minutes, a doctor wearing a COVID mask rushed in to check Diaz's vital signs. He was dead, but you have to ask how they could let him suffer like that. Why didn't they call it off? After all, it was evident that the execution was botched. A reporter who was there said for a long time Diaz's mouth was flexing like a fish out of water. Now let's go back in time for a famously failed execution. An executioner at Exeter Prison in England puts a white hood over a condemned man's head. He then fastens a belt around his ankles. That man, shaking, whispering prayers under his breath, braces himself and gets ready to depart. From a nearby window, the governor is watching, just as the executioner pulls the lever, and then nothing. Believe it or not, the condemned man, John Babacombe Lee, went to the scaffold on 3 occasions, and each time the device failed to work, even though the executioner had gone through all the routine checks. There didn't seem to be a problem. Nonetheless, the trapdoor each time failed to open. Lee became known as the man they couldn't hang. His story is even more mind-blowing when you consider the fact that his conviction for murder was based on some very suspect evidence. Right up until the time he was walking to that scaffold, he claimed he was innocent. Again, if you're so inclined, you could say some divine intervention took place. But the likely reality is the machine had a faulty drawbar, which
on top of his head.
Netflix, Amazon, and HBO Max are always swapping movies, but with one just simple search for
Simpsons character.
which prevented the trapdoor from opening. Either way, Lee was probably innocent of that murder, so the right thing happened in the end. In fact, when the judge asked him if he had anything to say about his death sentence, his exact words were, "The reason why I'm so calm is that I trust in the Lord, and he knows I'm innocent." Someone surviving 3 separate executions is kind of amusing for us now, but imagine how Lee felt all those 3 times. The experience must have been awful. Still, Lee later wrote that on attempt number 3, he just wanted a quick death, saying the suspense was becoming unbearable. I wanted to get it over at any price. You might also ask, how could the authorities do that 3 times? Surely there must be some kind of executioner ethics manual to follow? What about that thing called cruel and unusual punishment? In Lee's case, though, his torment was seen as cruel. After the 3rd attempt, the authorities said he'd been through enough. The British Home Secretary explained why, saying Lee was not reprieved because the merits of the case justified the step, but because of the miserable bungle which was made in attempting to hang him. But that was back in the day. Some botched executions have been worse than that, and most of them have taken place in the US. As you'll see today, some folks in the country have pretty much been fried in the electric chair, their hair ablaze, their bones shuddering, and not yet died as expected. Others have been injected with that killer poison and still came out breathing. Did those guys like Lee receive a get-out-of-death card too? Can you actually sue the authorities for messing up your execution? Surely even prisoners have rights when it comes to causing them incredible pain and emotional anguish. Well, in some cases they do call it off. When that happens, killing someone...
Imagine if they failed death row and they sued them because they messed up. He said he got rights.
Turns into trying to save someone's life. It's actually believed something like 7% of lethal injection executions are botched in the U.S., but perhaps the worst one involved a man named Clayton Lockett. His case was exceptional. He was also given a lethal injection of drugs. In case you don't know, the cocktail has 3 potent drugs. One part should knock the person out. The next bit should make him paralytic. And the last part should stop his heart. On a good day, that is. It should work, but judging the correct doses involves a bit of guesswork, and the person doing the guessing sometimes isn't a medical professional. The Atlantic explained, these officials base their confidence that a certain drug will work largely on the fact that it has seemed to work in the past. Lockett, a convicted killer, was given his lethal injection. By all accounts, the prison had had difficulty getting the drugs. This is why things didn't go to plan. They also used a sedative that wasn't usually used, called midazolam. In fact, a paramedic later told the press that lots of things seemed wrong that day. She said the syringes were the wrong size, and the tubing on the IV was not the right kind. Nonetheless, Lockett was strapped down in the death chamber while waiting for the drugs to be administered. The paramedic stuck in the needle, and blood flowed into the barrel. So far, so good. But then the IV came loose, and she tried to put the needle in again. It didn't work this time. Lockett had been an intravenous drug user, something that had damaged his veins. The paramedic later said she was told if you fail 3 times to get the needle in, you have to give up and let someone else do it. A doctor stepped in to help, which shouldn't happen.
Hold on, wait a minute.
Swear on the Hippocratic Oath, never to cause someone harm. He didn't like the look of Lockett's arms, but then he saw the perfect vein in his neck.
His arm burning too?
The paramedic had said, "Get me a needle for the jugular." As he was trying to stick the needle in Lockett's neck, the paramedic was working on his arms. Failure again, so the doc tried to find a vein in Lockett's groin. It was starting to look very bad. Then they brought out longer needles, and still they failed. And that's when the doctor asked for something called an IO infusion needle, described by the media as a kind of power drill that gets right into the bone instead of a vein. Now, embarrassed, they asked Lockett if he was okay. He replied, "I was going to see if I could get my mouth wiped."
They asked this man if he okay.
After they
shot this man. This man finna get OD.
They took a needle to get to his bone.
His bone.
They're tweaking.
They then finally got a vein. Lockett said he had no last words, after which the warden said, "Let the execution begin." The sedative was pumped into him, but the IV came loose, and most of it went right into his tissue, not the vein. So he wasn't knocked out. He was
leave this man alone.
Conscious of what was going on. He then seemed to go to sleep. So as usual, the lights brightened, and it was time to check if the condemned was completely sedated. He wasn't. The doctor even pinched him to try to get a reaction. He then said he's knocked out enough, so they injected the killer part of the cocktail. Then, when Lockett should have been dead, he twitched. He looked as though he wanted to talk. His legs moved. His hands moved. He was evidently in pain. The warden later said he thought, "My good God, he's coming out of this." He was. He lurched forward trying to get off the gurney. At that moment, the witnesses were in utter shock. Lockett's lawyer even started crying. Lockett was now twisting violently and trying to speak. His heart was only beating 20-something times a minute, but he was very much alive. He finally did manage to speak, saying one word, "Man." The doctor then lifted up the sheet and saw a massive ball had formed in Lockett's groin area. It was a ball of the drugs. Blood was also running down his thighs, but they didn't stop. The paramedic told Lockett to take a deep breath as she tried to get the needle back into place. She then told the doctor he hit an artery. As if things couldn't get any stranger, they then talked about giving Lockett CPR and taking him to the hospital. The paramedic later said that the point was to kill him, not save his life. Subsequently, the doctor asked the warden.
Wait, so somebody said, "Let's save this man," and the paramedic was like, "Nah, he on death row. He's supposed to die anyway."
What to do? To which the warden replied, "Is there another vein available? And if so, do you have another set of chemicals back there?" The doctor said no to both questions.
They done tested so many people on this man. Like, they tried all types of fluids.
I'm pretty sure this is real. Like they probably failed many times before doing the death.
See, no, chill out.
It was only then that they decided to stop the execution. That was officially decided, so now the doctor and the paramedic raced to save Lockett's life. They weren't fast enough. He died 10 minutes later after having a heart attack. The Lockett family later sued the prison, the executioners, the drug makers, and even 2 pharmacies. They said the new drugs that were used pretty much constituted experimentation, something the Nazis might have done back in the day. Human rights activists said the state had disgraced itself before the nation and the world. The execution was called barbaric by many. Even the White House said it fell short of humane standards. So why didn't they just give up and kill him on another day? The reason is that it takes time, and a botched...
Alright, we're gonna stop right there, man. Make sure y'all like, comment, subscribe. We're gonna do a part 2. If you want a part 2, let us know. You know what I'm saying? Comment part 2 below. If y'all want a part 2, you're gonna saying. But
that video was crazy.
It's crazy.
Yep, make sure y'all like, comment, and subscribe.
Like, they did it like 5 times on him. Like, if you test the chemicals on people like that, you might as well test the COVID people on them. You guys doing chemicals to people. what they should do.